You all look beautiful. Y'all are glowing.
That
It's the chemo.
quarantine.
It's the
All
chemo.
right, hey everybody.
It's the something
It's
else.
time
Y'all
for
are
the
glowing. Y'all got
doctors
that
in.
glow.
Time for the doctors in.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back once again to the Doctors In. I'm Dr. Monique Gary. I am a breast surgical oncologist here in Pennsylvania, just outside of Philly, and I'm joined with my co-host.
I'm Ricky Fairley, and I'm the CEO of Touch the Black Breast Cancer Alliance. And Mo, we have what I'm calling some fierce women today. Fierce forces of nature, the FFN Club.
I love that. That's that new hashtag. Yeah.
We have some badass breasties, and they are going to rock today. So we're so excited to talk about metastatic breast cancer, and specifically METAVIVR. And I'm going to let these ladies talk about METAVIVR, but METAVIVR now has 3 Black board members, one of whom is the president. How cool is that? And we have her here, Jamil. Hey, Jamil.
Hey.
So let me just give some back. I'm going to read the blurb on METAVIVR, and then you guys can tell the real deal. But METAVIVR,
Awesome.
How long has it been around? Years.
I should know
It's
that.
2009.
2009. So it's dedicated to the specific fight of women and men living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. At the time of METAVIVR's founding, no organization was dedicated to funding research for the disease, and no patient groups were speaking out about the dearth of stage 4 breast cancer. While more and more people have taken up the cry for stage 4 research, METAVIVR remains the sole U.S. organization dedicated to awarding annual stage 4 breast cancer research. And guess what? They have 3 Black board members. How cool is that? And then we have Dr. Lori. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Lori. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Okay, let's do a round robin, and then we'll get into this great conversation about metastatic breast cancer and how you guys are fierce forces of nature. So Dr. Lori, you go first.
Thank you. I have to begin by thanking you for having me on again. I love what you do, and am so thankful to have an opportunity to share. So I am a metastatic breast cancer patient. I was originally diagnosed with my breast cancer in 2013. I had a recurrence that was metastatic at the beginning of 2019. I know we'll get into the details a little bit later. I am a associate professor of surgery, and I am at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I have other hats that I wear. I am actually program director of 33 amazing young surgeons. And I'm also head of our Mammo Day, which is a Mammo Day is for our less well-insured patients to get mammography as well as clinical breast exams and cervical exams.
Wow. So 33 students. Wow. Dr.
Yeah.
Lori.
They're more than students. They are residents, and so they have graduated from medical.
They're real doctors. They're real doctors.
They're real doctors, and they are phenomenal. I love them.
And we need it. Dr. Laura, we're seeing more and more articles. Representation matters.
It does.
Yep. For the residents and the trainees, but also for the mentors. So I'm so thankful that you're there, because, when I did my residency, we needed a Dr. Lori. We needed more mentors and more folks to, yeah, absolutely. So I'm so thankful for you and for that program at Howard. It has a long, beautiful history.
Yeah.
It does. And to be a part of that is just amazing. And we were just sharing a little bit beforehand that one of the things in being in an academic practice, the pinnacle is to actually get a professorship in the area. I'm an associate professor, but the final goal is to be a professor. And I just submitted my application for professor. And so
we'll pray for that.
Prayerfully.
Now they're all going to have to be held accountable for that, because we're on here, right? Everybody's going to for that.
I'll be the first Black woman. They've never had a Black woman in the department who's
Howard.
At
Howard.
Howard.
Well, we may have to call Kamala for this,
It
right?
just goes to show, I know, it just goes to show that there's still work to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
But if not now, when?
Absolutely.
Right,
Right,
right.
right.
It's our year.
Jones, less than 2% of Black faculty make it into academia and into tenured professorships and into actual full professorships. Less than 2%.
Wow.
So we are, sorely underutilized and under mentored and underrepresented in these areas. And so at a place like Howard that prides itself on being first, I would imagine that they will continue along this vein. And I'm speaking to Howard University Department of Surgery at this time. I would imagine that they would like to continue in this vein of being first and finest and being pioneering in the field by promoting Dr. Lori to full professorship.
Yeah. Amen.
I look forward to it. We're excited about it.
Amen, amen, amen.
Amen. Amen. Jamil, you want to go next and introduce your other board members too? The new president of the board of METATHRIVERS. How cool is that?
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Ricky. So my name is Jamil Rivers. I am the newly ordained board president of METATHRIVERS, the first Black president in its history. So I am very honored that I was selected, and we just got right to work. So I was diagnosed with metastatic de novo breast cancer. So stage 4 from the start in 2018, got really involved with advocacy from the beginning. My work is primarily involved with inequities. So breaking up disparities when it comes to metastatic breast cancer, the disparities in research funding and support, and also the disparities when it comes to Black breast cancer, and especially Black women, since we're dying at a higher percentage than our white counterparts. I work full-time as a nonprofit chief financial officer of Education Works, where we are encouraging, K through 12 and young adults to pursue STEM careers, some of those cancer careers. So we have great partnerships with, Philly is known for eds and meds. So we're known for, creating the spark for them to pursue those careers so we can have more Black and brown professionals represented in these careers in clinical trials and research and medical professionals and healthcare careers. And I also,
I want to talk to the kids.
I know.
all right, yeah, we could definitely set that up, because in order to be it, they have to see it.
Yeah.
So we definitely believe in that. And we don't believe in just keeping kids safe. We believe in them, seeing the example of what careers to pursue. And from my own breast cancer experience, I also launched my own personal organization, the Chrysalis Initiative, which deals with, barrier intervention and resource navigation, patient education, and industry training. So I was so excited when METATHRIVERS asked me to join the board. And of course, I want metastatic breast cancer to be a chronic illness. That is the mission of METATHRIVERS. We want to stop the deaths of breast cancer. And I know I've only been on this journey for 2.5 years, but it was bewildering to me to understand why so much money went elsewhere and not into metastatic breast cancer, when MBC is the breast cancer you die from. You don't die from breast cancer in the breast. So if we want to stop the deaths, we should take the lessons that we've learned from HIV/AIDS, for instance, and deal with what's killing you. So for a long time, the methodology was, let's just find it early. Let's screen it. Let's nuke it. Let's make sure the oncotype score is great. Let's do everything right. But yet we know you could do everything perfectly and still have a 35% chance of becoming metastatic. So how about we stop this whole methodology of just finding it early and nuking it early and treating it early? Even though early detection is critical, it is important, but that's not what's killing us. So let's deal with what's killing us so that this can be a chronic disease. So I'm using all of my energy and all of my passion and all of my resources and my tendency to be a disruptor to make sure that we have disparities addressed and that we increase the resources and funding available to MBC. If people are serious about stopping the deaths of breast cancer, that money, those resources should be allocated to MBC, metastatic breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer, because that is the breast cancer you die from. It should be at least 50%. And when we talk about disparities with Black women dying at a higher rate, if we were to just address that, that's low-hanging fruit. We could reduce the death rate by 30%. So those are the things that I am critically focused on. And, METAVIVERS signed on to the Tiger Lily Foundation Inclusion Pledge. We were committed to be representative of what the needs of our constituency is. And we're going to make sure that, we have specific targeted solutions for disparities when it comes to the Black and Brown community, educate the industry on what needs to be done, and let's stop just accepting the status quo and be complacent with it. It's unacceptable. We're not dying anymore. And so I also have our METAVIVER board VP joining me, Chalisa Shepard, who is living with NBC, and Shantae Randall is a newbie board member with METAVIVER, who is also very passionate and ready to get to work as well.
Yay.
Let's ring the bell for everything she just said. I wish I had a bell. Every time I hear her speak on the meet, I'm like, yes.
Yes, I'm with her. I'm with
Right.
Jamil.
We ready to go. Whatever it is, let's point
And
it.
we have a lot of initiatives already going on right now. We're focused on, partnering with organizations to address those disparities, really making all these people that have this money and organizations that are talking about how they want to stop the deaths from breast cancer to step up. Put your money into NBC. Put those resources into NBC. Let's provide we've studied this to death. We know what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And in order to save my life, we need research to go into NBC. And it actually benefits early stagers when that investment is made into research. Look at all the most innovative drugs in the past 5 years. They studied that with metastatic breast cancer, and it is now benefiting and extending life in early stagers. So that's what we really need that investment to go into.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about across the board, Department of Defense, NIH, NCI, all these pharma companies. We need to start with metastatic breast cancer so we can stop deaths from breast cancer. And when it comes to inequities and disparities, we've studied this to death. We know it needs to be done. We know it's associated with access to universal health care, Medicaid expansion, making sure that there aren't these barriers and interventions, making sure that we have accountability metrics in place for unconscious bias so that, these medical professionals are not functioning as gatekeepers, and Black women can at least get the standard of care. At least, at a minimum, should be standard across
Absolutely.
the board.
I love that you said
So
that.
that's what we're focused on.
Because the number one reason that Black women don't participate in clinical trials, and we talked about this even last week, is because they are not asked.
They're asked.
Right, Dr. Lori?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think it's so critical, not only to emphasize the pharma and those that are going to provide the monetary support, but the education also has to be honestly on the in the medical field as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I cannot tell you how many stories I still hear of people being told, even today, I saw a patient today who someone told them that their disease, because they were Black and because they had triple negative, and she was a stage 1 triple negative breast cancer patient, that she wasn't going to do well. And that she, and all of the things that are untrue when you treat these patients were vocalized to her. And it's unfortunately I was a second opinion. This is her system of care. And when we talk about bias, implicit bias, I hear it and I see it in the oncologic aspect of everyone being treated the same. We talked about this a little bit last week, that everyone has different objectives to their endpoint.
Mhm.
Like I said, I have an 8-year-old. I will do whatever it takes for me to be alive for the next 18 years.
Right.
So I may have a different objective than what the medical oncologist may have in their thought process, that, we'll deal when things come up. I want to be aggressive. I want you to find things. I want you to try to save my life at any cost, at anything that I should actually have an opportunity to know about.
Yeah. By any means.
Funny that you mentioned that, Dr. Wilson, because that's sort of how my whole history with breast cancer got started. I was 8.5 months pregnant with my youngest daughter, and my OBGYN kept telling me, even when I kept saying I felt the lump, oh, it's nothing. It was just, it's probably clogged with ducts. And I had a 2-year-old at home at the same time. So me thinking just like you, I ain't gonna do any and everything to be there for my kids, for my babies.
Right.
And so I went in it wholeheartedly, aggressively. And I must say, here I am 21 years later, for a diagnosis later.
That's where I want to be.
And that's what
Say
I
it again, Teresa, how many years? Say it again. How many years? Say it again.
21 years later, almost 19 years metastatic. And my daughters just graduated college
Oh, what a blessing.
last month. So
That is the blessing I want in my life. And it's very interesting. I want to tell this story just through the lens of understanding where some people are when they talk about metastatic disease. I was blessed to have the opportunity to have a second opinion at one of the number 1 to whatever facilities in the country. And I was told that in my first discussion, I think they thought I was being too aggressive and too, I don't know, that I wanted too much. And that person told me, you know what, we're going to have to make a decision of when your care is going to stop. And I was completely taken off guard. I think that because at that time I was talking about, surgical procedures, should I go for any type of additional resection? Should I be, what should I, these are the things that I think are important for me. And I think that they were trying to ground me in, I don't know what, taking back over the conversation, I guess.
Wow.
Me and my
in a reality that doesn't belong to you. That's what I hear,
Yeah. And
they're trying to prepare you for an endpoint that you're not at.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it was my first discussion with this person.
Right.
But how dare they? How dare they?
Exactly.
Your life. How dare they? You tell you having have that conversation. Why don't they just assume that you want to live as long as you can? Like, why would you even make an assumption like that? That's crazy.
absolutely.
And what pains me is, what about those women that are not assertive enough to be like, you know what? And they'll just accept it. I come across so many women who don't understand the treatment they're on, or just accept whatever is presented to them. And we know that due to unconscious bias or irregularities, that Black women are not being presented with the same options and access and treatments that our white counterparts are. So that's why it's so important for us. It's a multi-layered issue when it comes to disparities, but we're going to do what we can to make sure that as soon as they're diagnosed, that they know as much as they can from the onset, in order to make sure that, you don't know what you don't know. And I come across so many women after the fact, years later, because this impacts your outcomes. This impacts your quality of life, your likelihood of survival. Where you start and how you start is so critical. And so you have to know what is not being offered to you.
It affects your mindset as well, because
please share your story, Shantae, because that is a perfect example.
I was diagnosed early stage triple negative in October 2017. And so I made all these decisions rapid fire to do the double mastectomy, chemo, blah, blah, blah. And when I was done, I was NED for 11 months. And I got involved in advocacy then and doing peer mentoring. But I had a metastatic recurrence in April of 2019. And what happened, I went immediately, I was diagnosed on a Tuesday, the 2nd, and then LBBC had their Metastatic Breast Cancer Conference. And there's nothing like being in a room of women who are all going through the same struggle as you, the same treatment. That's where I met Ricky, because she was at the PMBC table. And she was from Maryland, and I talked to her, and she was like, oh, we had the same we used the same oncology office, because I had a private oncologist at the time, and I became exposed to other people. And the education piece and the trials and stuff like that, it gives you hope. So it changed my whole outlook. And then I began to look out, and I see these women that are included on this panel living and sharing their stories, and it gave me hope. And I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna be an outlier just like them. If they can do it, I can.
Right.
So I originally had oligometastatic lesion. It was just one in my sternum. So I had radiation like once or twice. But in December at SABCS, I had after SABCS, I had a massive spread in 5 ribs, 11 vertebrae, and a whole bunch of other spots. And I talked to the oncologist at the time, and he was like, well, we'll just do systemic treatment, no big deal. But then I had just come from SABCS, learned about all the trials. And so I was like, you know, I was just at SABCS. Why weren't you there?
Yeah, say what that, explain to people what that is. So I'm going to go back. So NED means no evidence of disease.
Oh, no evidence of disease. Yes. Sorry. That means I was cured.
And then, exactly. And then SABCS is the biggest global breast cancer conference. It's held in San Antonio. And we went there last year with a force full of Black women and
and we learned so much. And so I was learning about all these things, and I was talking to him, and he was like, I don't want clinical trials to be your first line of treatment. And I said, why not? He said, just because I don't want to. I said, well, I'm going to go over here to this world-renowned hospital that's down the street. And I'm going to get a second opinion.
Right.
And as soon as I walked in the door, they said, this clinical trial, this, or you can do that. What would you like to do? And I said, oh, I want that clinical trial that has access to a drug that I wouldn't normally qualify for because I don't have the mutation for it. And here I am 8 months later on the clinical trial, stable. Nothing has grown, everything is dying, or you know, it's the same as it was when I started. So it can literally change your outcomes and your outlook and how you live with your life. And I don't understand why we are not, as Black women, given that option. And and it's the medical bias. I know why it is, but I just don't understand why it's still happening. And I'm also a participant on the Johns Hopkins patient advisory panel. And I told the chief yesterday, like, we really need to have the clinical trial discussions with women in the beginning. If we just address the elephant in the room up front, no one, you know, fault is fault, but it's not yours. And then we start offering them those choices. And then you hook them up with someone who looks like them, who can really talk to them and explain, like, you know, I told her Sheila's story. Sheila McGowan is that she was on Enhertu 2 years on the clinical trial before it became available. And it probably saved her life.
Yeah.
So I know people are always like guinea pig, and, you know, we have these things in our community, but it can save your life. And
Save your life.
But can we talk about that? So just to talk about clinical trials, knowing that there are phases of clinical trials.
Right.
And you can absolutely choose which phase you want. And if you're doing a later phase, it means that you are getting equal plus a little bit more. And so you're likely going to get exactly what you would normally get. Plus you have the option of even having a better outcome. So it's important to know that it's not a guinea pig. And I understand in the early phases, those are really trying to just figure out, do they work? But when we're looking at those later phase studies, they're really more than being a guinea pig. It really is about making sure that you have the standard of care, plus you probably will get something else, hopefully, that will improve your quality of life or improve your ability to have longer life, to have a better outcome. And I that is the thing that I am so happy to hear your being on the board and your push to have these things be at the forefront of discussions, because exactly what that medical oncologist said was probably something that they learned in their training, something that they just continued to practice, not because it was evidence-based, but just because it was dogma.
I got to jump in here, look, Dr. Lori, you're right.
To live, you know, I want to live. And I love the story that you told about being on the board and sharing your perspectives, because being at the table means something.
Right.
Means a lot.
Mhm.
And that's what we're going to
Means
make
a
sure we
lot.
do.
I want to jump in and piggyback off of that because you said something really key. And I think that the education, having come out of training within the last, 10 years, the education for oncologic doctors, surgeons, medical oncologists, radiation oncologists for metastatic breast cancer, I think is very variable and lacking. So surgeons are not, because of dogma, because traditionally there have not been great surgical options for metastatic breast cancer, depending on where that mets is, et cetera, because of a lack of research. There's so much writing off of the metastatic patient that happens at the surgical level, that happens at the radiation level, that happens at the medical oncologist level, and where you go. And Shante, you hit the head on the nail on the head here, is that where you go needs to be someplace that does specialize in metastatic breast cancer, because many times the community settings don't offer the trials. And if the trials aren't offered there, they may not bring them up. Those physicians may not even be aware of those trials. They're not on their radar because they're not enrolling patients in them. Right. And so you're not offered something because the eyes can't see what the mind doesn't know. And so if they don't know about it, so they don't offer it to you. The surgeons there hear metastatic and they say, okay, well, there's no intervention for me, not understanding that there can be a role for surgical intervention in metastatic breast cancer. And so I think there's, as you guys push to educate and to empower, do consider the standardization of the education, even of physicians. And what opportunities there are and where the gaps are, and bring in some folks to begin to educate community docs, because 70% of cancer care is done in the community hospitals. It's not done in the ivory towers. It's not done at the Hopkins. It's not done at the Sloan Ketterings. It's done at the Grady's right down the street. And so we have to make sure that we are educating the doctors who are taking care of us. And I think that that's something that we can do a better job of, for sure, because, we're perishing for lack of knowledge there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we're trying to deal with this across the board. METAVIVR as an organization, rounding up advocates to engage with our Congress people to talk about policy. Let's do this at the legislative level in order to change the policy. Just thinking about the strides that we've made with, policy changing as far as what the resources are and what the education is, and the accountability for younger survivors, and the survivorship series, and all the great funding that CDC has put in place when it comes to understanding the unique needs of breast cancer survivors under the age of 45. Okay, that's great. We now need to deal with the dearth and the lack of resources for the metastatic patients that are living longer. And we really need that money to step up. And so we have to talk about the step therapy. We have to talk about, the lack of resources when it comes, those barriers as far as being involved in clinical trials, not having those community-based partnerships set up in order to kind of facilitate that enrollment and recruitment for clinical trials in order for them to stay engaged with it. Data sharing and reporting, making sure that there aren't waiting periods in order for us to, receive support if, say, we lose our jobs or don't have the funding available or need to get through treatment. There should not be a 6-month or 2-year waiting period in order to have coverage for the supports that we need to have care. And so these are all health equity, even put the investment and increase the dollar amount where it's at least 50% for cancer research when it comes to breast cancer. We're still only at 10%, but if you really want to save lives, it should not be at 10%. It has to be significantly higher. And so every dollar that goes to METAVIVR is invested in research that's solely for metastatic breast cancer research. And so at this point, I'm kind of annoyed. I've been in this for about a year and a half. I don't want to hear about people rounding up and raising money for metastatic breast cancer research, claiming that they're saving lives, but that money is not going towards metastatic breast cancer research.
Absolutely.
So I can just push for METAVIVR to receive the funding, and I know that we will use it for metastatic breast cancer research. And we're also, not just engaging with our Congress people to change policy, funding that metastatic breast cancer research. We're also studying disparities and what those factors are. Why is it that, Black women are not getting that same access to genetic testing and genomic testing and clinical trial information, and being able to provide that community bridges in order for them to stay enrolled. And even just the unconscious bias and industry education for them to understand you're functioning as a gatekeeper right now.
Right.
And so it's informing their decisions, that Black woman that's presenting with symptoms and saying, you know what, I feel something, or you know what, I want to be a part of that. And if that's a single woman, or if she lives by herself, or you're already making assumptions about social economic assumptions about what she can afford or what she can't, or how compliant she's going to be with that trial, all that is impeding on her care. And that's unacceptable at this point.
And like
so
Jamia mentioned, we're actually METATHRIVER in the process right now. We're going to Capitol Hill virtually.
Yes.
Speaking on these. So we're still at work at home.
And they're actually more accessible, working remotely.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
More meetings now.
I love it.
More meetings than ever before.
Absolutely. So here we come, Congress.
Yeah. You guys
there was an article and a radio segment in NPR a while back about implicit bias and unconscious bias in cancer care. And not just as it relates to race, which I know is very relevant for us, but there was a woman in Delaware I think she was a retired professor, and she got diagnosed with HER2 positive disease during a time when there were a lot of trials going on for Herceptin and Perjeta, et cetera. And she said she went to one institution, and she'd done her research, and she went to one institution, and they told her about what she would need as far as trials, and she went for a second opinion, and that physician did not offer her the trial or the more aggressive therapy, because he says, well, are you married? And she said, no. And he said, well, you have no husband? And she said, no. And he said, well, and she said, but I have family members, I have cousins, I have, loved ones, I have a great support system, neighbors, church, etc. And he said, no, if you're not married, you're not going to be able to do well in this trial. And he was very paternalistic and wrote her off because she was single. And we know that single women have a higher mortality in cancer care than married counterparts even. And this is like,
wow.
In 2020,
family
year of our
support
Lord,
makes a big difference. I must say my family have been pit bulls. And they have been there every step of the way with my medical care. And I remember I was diagnosed first in 1998, metastatic in 2001. So that was during the time of the Herceptin trial. And I remember I was so sick, and I kept asking my nurse, actually, my sister was doing a lot of the answering the questions. And she asked her, and she could never give her any information about the trial study. And until my sister was like, never mind, we can't go with that. We don't have, why would you want a patient to sign off on something that you can't give any information about?
Right.
That's insane to me.
Right. And I just think that it is so important for us to really focus on how much the gatekeepers have an influence on what your outcomes are going to be.
Yeah.
It is insane how many levels of care can be in between, and especially if you are not someone who has the information.
Yeah.
That if that information is never shared with you, it may mean the difference between you stopping and moving ahead. And I just want to emphasize over and over again, ask questions, make sure that you're heard, make sure that they understand what your goals are. And if it doesn't feel right, if they're not in line with trying to save your life and trying to put stop you, then they're not the right provider, most likely.
Another doctor, get another doctor. And you guys, I keep hearing you talk about ask the questions, know the stuff. Self-advocacy is so important.
Yes, so important.
And, so many
but so many are worried about what the doctor might think.
Right.
And questions.
Right. Yep. And the doctor is not God. We know who you have to know who's in control, and you have to stand up for yourself. And we know when it's not right. In your spirit when something doesn't feel right or sound right. We know our bodies better than anybody. And even when we feel in our spirits, like that gut feel we have. And if you feel like something's right, you have to stand up. You have to talk about it. You have to.
I would dare say
fire your doctor. It's your party, it's your body, it's your cancer, it's your life.
And
the
don't let
first
them put you
litmus
in a
test.
box.
Don't
If
let them
you
put
ask
you
your
in a box.
doctor questions
Yeah,
and they get annoyed and they are severely annoyed to the point where they don't answer your questions anymore,
Right.
find a new
Run.
doctor. That's the bare minimum, right?
Yes.
right.
That's
Right.
the bare minimum.
Yeah, they're human.
Respect.
But we have to know, and you know, we're so afraid sometimes, and we don't want to talk about it. You know, how many of us, oh, don't talk about that. Don't talk about the breast cancer.
Yeah.
Talk about cancer, period.
No, we have to get over that. We have to get over that and fight for ourselves. And you know, and if you don't feel like you can fight, call one of us. We'll fight for you. I
Right.
mean,
I'm going to say that, Ricky,
Yeah.
because there's so many, there's still people that are diagnosed metastatic who do not understand metastatic disease.
Yeah.
So,
We'll tell you where to
be
find-
okay to talk to other survivors and,
Mhm.
have someone to rally behind you, to go along with you. Be
yeah.
okay. We would do that.
I want to ask you guys
We-
about
No,
that.
honestly, it is still difficult to say the word metastatic outside of your circle. And knowing that people don't, even medical professionals don't understand what metastatic is. I
Yeah.
worry that my diagnosis of metastatic, it will impact my ability to go up for professor, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
because they're going to be like, well, why should we invest in her
Mhm.
if metastatic disease means that she's not going to be part of this organization for very much longer? When
Yeah.
actually,
Because 19 years I am here at metastatic.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's hard, and I know that it's difficult to discuss, but it's so important for us to advocate about surrounding this issue.
Yeah, and leveraging the community, like we said, there are women who are afraid, like when you first get the diagnosis, your head is spinning. But like Dr. Mo said, if you talk to your doctor and you ask for a second opinion and they get offended, that's not the provider for you. Luckily, my provider was like, okay, go wherever you want, because he knew I was going to go anyway. And he just worked in conjunction with all of the providers. So you should be able to have that type of relationship and not be afraid. There's a lot of women, especially in our community, that just don't ask the questions or choose to educate themselves. Dr. Google, no, is not the best, but finding support groups and like Touch or for the Breast of Us and METATHRIVER that will link you to someone or people in the community, and leveraging the information that we know. Terlissa's been here for how many years? 19 years metastatic.
Yeah.
So, when I first met her in SABCS San Antonio in December, I went up to you and I was in tears and I just hugged you, and I couldn't even talk. Like, just seeing your story and you just still pushing forward, it just makes me
So
more
much.
determined to do that.
And you got to see it to be it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when I have symptoms or, something is going on, I text my NBC sisters and I say, hey, did this happen to you? Is this weird? Or do I email the doctor right now? That type of community that you get from talking about it instead of being quiet, it expands your reach. You can have access to doctors somewhere else because my friend is a patient over here at and they can talk to Dr. Lynn. You know what I'm saying? If you get brain mets. So it's just a lot of different things that would behoove our community if we were a little more open-mouthed about our health and our questions, and ask the questions and really advocate it and make the demands without being called the angry Black woman.
Right.
Yes.
We all get that.
Right.
But just standing on your own 2 feet and saying, no, I want to know, this is what I should be getting. And if you're not getting it, then you got to seek out and find it and link up with other people in our community.
And
Right.
shall I tell you that metastatic
Right.
world is a whole nother family out there. We all know that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
I
we're
wanna
having
ask,
time right
if
now.
you guys
We
have-
appreciate our value.
Yeah, I really believe too, because I'm not metastatic, it's my responsibility to help you guys.
Yes.
Thank
You
you.
know what I mean? Like, I believe that's part of my job, because I know we need the research. And so,
Thank you.
on the days when you don't feel like getting up, I can get up and call someone and get on the phone and go yell. and
Thank
scream.
you.
And you know that I will. But,
Yes.
but there's a lot of me's out there. We all need to, support our sisters, because, there's a 39% recurrence rate.
Mm-hmm.
Higher
And-
for triple negative.
And also,
any of us.
I-
So,
I just think it's so important for us to understand that in our community that we often have different social networks than just a partner. That we have church families and we have, relatives that will step in and be equally as supportive in the fight against this metastatic entity. And understanding that is an important part of understanding who we are, because I think that's oftentimes providers may not understand what our community is about and how supportive. I have found tremendous support, more support in opening up than having kept it quiet.
So you walk in and you say, I am a fierce force of nature. What have you got for me? Right.
Dr. Lori, we see that in the LGBTQ community as well. There's chosen family. There are people in your circle, in your network that may not be your blood relatives, but that are your family and that can advocate for you. And I think that physicians
strong advocates for you.
Need to be sensitized to that. And I want to ask you guys about a topic that we really can do better with. And this is navigation, right? So navigation in early breast cancer looks like a navigator a nurse who's going to make appointments for you, who's going to get you over to your medical oncologist, who's going to get you to your radiation, who's going to make sure your records get there, who's going to connect you with the social worker and all these things. My navigator is the gatekeeper to many, many services. And when a patient has metastatic breast cancer, they fall off the radar for some reason in many places. And I want you to talk about your experiences there and also what we can do differently and what we can do better. And then the second part of that question is, what is your understanding of the benefit and the services of things like palliative care? Because that seems to be the reflexive next step for many doctors and for many patients, and there's some barriers there. So what do you understand about that concept as it applies to your ongoing daily life, not your end of life care? So 2 parts, navigation first.
It's definitely needed. I didn't get it per se back when I was first diagnosed, because literally my oncologist had written me off. So they were pretty much piecemealing me along the way. And now that I see what the patient navigators can do and what they are doing, is needed. And because there's another outlet to keep the sanity in your mental aspect, it goes a long ways with this diagnosis. And you just can't go at it alone, is my feeling.
Right. And so when I was early stage, I actually didn't have a patient navigator because I was in a private office and they didn't really have that. But now that I'm metastatic, I actually do have 2 patient navigators here at the facility, and I text them. They are so key to whatever is going on. If I am hurting and I cannot get in or whatever, they make stuff happen like that, just like that. And it is amazing. Without them, some of the things they put together a clinic. That's why they're one of the reasons why I agreed to be on their board, because they're like, we really need to hear from patients and stuff like that. They've put together a metastatic breast cancer clinic just for metastatic patients. And when they start from the jump, you'll meet your oncologist, the palliative care, the social worker, the navigator, the integrative medicine, physical med and rehab, the sexual health person. Like, they have it all put together. So where, they talk to you, so you know what's available to you from the beginning. And to answer the second part of the question is, when I got to this facility, when I switched, they had palliative care. I went to my oncologist for everything, but it was Percocet and OxyContin, and there wasn't really a lot of other things. And so palliative care has talked to me about breathing, have talked to me about other modalities. When I have acupuncture, we'll see if she can do the electrostimulation acupuncture, because I have frozen shoulder syndrome. It's a lot of different things that when people say palliative care, they kind of think like, oh, is that end of life? Is that hospice? No, they're not synonymous. It's something totally different. And it's actually a doctor that has a pharmacist that's there. And so they look at everything I'm already taking, and they think about the best ways to mitigate some of these symptoms and side effects while maintaining my quality of life. And that's what I want. And so they talk to me about those things, and they give some medical, advice, or they'll say, go to integrative medicine or acupuncture or something like that, so that I can, feel better.
So I can say that personally, I had to be assertive to structure what Shantae described. So we have all the resources at my center, but I had to be the assertive one to say, I need this person and that person and this person, and do the legwork myself, which is a whole nother job in itself. And so part of what METAVIVR, and even when we just think about that definition of living with cancer, being a survivor, what does that entail? And including metastatic breast cancer needs in that definition as well, to think about what is on average, we found that a patient will have to seek out 17 different types of support resources on average, just with a metastatic breast cancer diagnosis. Who has time for that?
Absolutely.
So I think it really makes sense for us to have part of the standard best practices, and add those appropriation and fiscal incentives for, to have the accountability there, to make sure that your minority patients are receiving at least the standard of care, and have it tracked and validated and quantified, with data that shows that those interventions are being provided to your Black and Brown patients the way that they are to your white patients. And also to have it already incorporated in, so not just the medical oncology piece, but to integrative therapies, the support resources, the sexual intimacy, and all of that, and have that be a part of education. So I see we're working on now where there's funding available to kind of get that, all these various medical associations to get that training, so that they can understand where we don't have all these silos when it comes to that oncology team, and folks working disjointed. And I was just saying to my metastatic breast cancer support group today that palliative care can help you last and sustain yourself on a treatment that's working. I have so many folks that are like, you know what, I can't do this treatment because of X, Y, and Z, but yet this treatment is keeping your cancer at bay. So we need to address the side effects instead of switching. I mean, you could possibly talk about dosing, but let's look into those palliative care options in order to sustain yourself to last on this particular treatment. I was just sharing with the ladies earlier, yes, I use tobacco shade cream. I use arnica cream, and I'm now no evidence of disease where year and a half, even with all the crazy, side effects, and did a year of chemo and went to work every day with 3 little ones. So, there are ways to kind of mitigate the side effects where you can sustain yourself and keep going. You don't have to quit. And so we need that to be standard of care, best practice, where it is incorporated. I'm at an NCI center, and I even have to be the assertive one where I am doing the legwork, making appointments, chasing people down in order to get the care that Shantae described, when it just should be provided and part of your standard of care from the onset, from the beginning.
I think that's a huge campaign that needs to happen from your organization especially. And shout out to groups that stand in the gap, like Unite for Her, which provides services on an ongoing basis for especially for metastatic breast cancer patients, ovarian as well now. I think Sue Weldon is watching, and she's done a remarkable job actually of really making sure that the services that you need, like acupuncture, like Reiki, organic produce going to the house, things that are available for some patients, can be available in an ongoing, consistent basis for metastatic patients. But that type of a campaign, as well as an education campaign about palliative care, is something that I think we really need to push for, because so many patients and even their doctors, we in Tumor Board, every week we meet and we discuss patients, and we go through our checklist. Does this patient have any psychosocial concerns, financial concerns, palliative care concerns? And as soon as you mention the word palliative care, the doctor, oh no, I don't want palliative care involved. Are you kidding me? I have patients with early stage breast cancer who get palliative care consults, so they can do better on their treatment, so they can live in their homes longer. So they, it's a quality of life thing, not an end of life thing. And I think educating patients about that is huge.
That's the key, educating.
Educating, I think we're talking about 2 parts, navigation. I'll talk about my experience sort of flipping as a patient as well as a clinician. I'm at a safety net hospital, which means that 75% or probably closer to 80% of our patients are on some government sponsored healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, or uninsured. And what we know about that patient population, especially our patient population, the median income is somewhere about $24,000 for 4 members of a family living in a household, which means that different decisions get made for those patients, because the economic aspect of having only a limited amount of money coming in means that you are oftentimes on a very slippery slope if you miss any income coming into the household.
Yeah.
And so what do we designed a transdisciplinary clinic, which has everyone meet everyone in their care, the medical oncologist, the surgeon, the navigator, the radiation oncologist, social work, as well as we have a pastoral care, as well as genetics, all in the same time frame. So they come for an afternoon, as opposed to 5 different visits that they have to take off 5 different days. So they know when they don't work, they don't get paid. And so making sure that organizations understand who they're treating, what their social, economic, and their determinants of health are important. When we talk about the palliative aspect, I think that we need to oftentimes maybe think about how can we change the name so people now can think of it as chronicity and not as end of life. Because I just think that the tag has been on there so long that changing it over to something, the definition being something different without the word being something different, it's just hard to overcome. I think palliative for people, even though we're talking about chronicity, is hard for people to see. So I'm hoping that we can begin to shape a different campaign and a different word that can potentially be utilized when we're talking about chronic care for patients as opposed to palliative care.
Let's look at that and brainstorm about that for October, especially.
Yeah.
That. And also, Ricky, I know you got a real problem with the term clinical trials,
I hate
right?
that word. I hate that word. Sounds like
Right. And what was the last thing I came up with? I think it was treatment enhancement protocols or something like that. Try to rename clinical trials
we need to
experiments,
all this stuff,
to something that enhances your treatment, right?
Exactly.
The baggage, we have to get rid of the baggage.
Right.
And help people.
I wanted to piggyback on what Dr. Lori was saying is there is something that is a need that I know I've encountered is no one talks about the financial toxicity. Yes, we talk about social workers.
Look at that today.
But do they go so far and just say, do they automatically apply you for financial aid, for grants? Are these people at these institutions, do they start going to work for you, for the patient? Or do I have to initiate that? And oftentimes, because I have a full-time job and a part-time job. And so because I make a certain wage, that kind of precludes me from any further assistance. But having breast cancer, early stage is expensive, but living with metastatic breast cancer is even more expensive, which is why I have 2 jobs. And so, that is an area that really should be addressed is, we all talk about the financial toxicity, but it's not something that they do automatically as part of those big group or team. We can do counseling, pastoral care, but you need to talk to me about how much money I'm really bringing home. Address it to me in the right way, because there's a way you can talk to people in the Black community about their money. Now, you can't come talk to them any old kind of way, but you need to know how to talk to your audience to get to like, how much are you really bringing home for groceries? After all of that, how much do you really have for copays or what have you? And automatically start applying these folks for grants, or letting them at least know that this organization will do these things and help you out in these certain areas. So I know that's something in our community that I have noticed that every organization can do better with.
And it eases the burden on your care. I'm telling you, it does.
And the biggest thing is you don't have to muddle through. You don't have to muddle through. Get all the support that you can possibly get. Don't think that you have to be in the struggle or a crisis has to happen before you take advantage of that support.
Right.
I think that you bring up such a relevant point, that even clinical trials don't talk about what your financial status is in a real substantive way, so that you understand what your obligation will be. And I think that when we're talking about funding, there should be funding out there, because oftentimes that just gets said, well, we don't cover that. Right. Why don't we cover that?
Right.
Why don't we cover co-pays? Why don't we cover additional costs? Why don't we cover these other real life drains on our income, so that we can be a part of it?
Right. And so many deductibles are so high now.
Yes.
People like, I have a job, I have insurance, and they don't realize it till they have their surgery, and then they have a $5,000 hospital bill because their deductible is so high. I had that today.
And the loss of work and wages just from being able to participate in these things,
Yeah.
You don't get reimbursed, for your salary for taking off to participate in a clinical trial or to go do things, and so I think that those are all areas that we definitely have to do better. If we want to see more trial participation, we have to eliminate a lot of the barriers. And many of us are primary breadwinners and caretakers for our family, for children, and for elders, right? We're caring for everybody. And so how do we get folks like that to participate in clinical trials when, you can't even take time off to get a colonoscopy, right? To get it, right? You can't even, what good is having acupuncture if you don't have anybody to watch your kids?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Wow.
We're creating more work. There's so much work to do, you guys. I mean, I say that every day.
Needed work.
Black breast
But we're busy.
We're busy. There's so much work to do.
I want all of you to come back again, and I want to talk more about the specific plans and campaigns, and I want you to give some action items and ways for people to get involved. This show has generated almost 40,000 touch points every week. People are watching, and I think that there's for us to put these folks to work, to mobilize them, to educate them. And I want us to really talk about what you need so that we can be a support to you and get people involved, because when they have some skin in the game, guess what? Things get really real, and we educate ourselves because we have to take care of our sisters and our family and our church members. And I think that there's room for that. So I definitely would like to have all of you to come back again, please.
Awesome. Metaviver.org. Please visit metaviver.org. We need, right now we're going through Stampede. We can use you to talk to your Congress people so that we can increase, metastatic breast cancer research funding, pass these bills that are kind of sitting there in order to support metastatic breast cancer patients. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Knowledge is Power Symposium with Living Beyond Breast Cancer. That will be next month, and you can register for now. That Touch BCA is supporting me with, and Dr. Gary is participating on.
Dr.
And so
Lori
I'm really excited about that. Newly diagnosed Black patients, newly diagnosed with breast cancer. So
that's right. And also,
come on by and check us out.
We have our Black Data Matters campaign that we're doing too, to help you get ready for clinical trials, consolidate your medical records. It's so important to have everything in one place. That's all on our website too, Touch BBCA. So we're doing a lot of things. Let's all link together. I believe in, we got to collaborate. We got to be together and work towards getting rid of this stuff. And
we're gonna have you two on our NBC podcast that I am a co-host of. We will have Jamil. I'm going to interview her next week, but we're going to have Ricky and Dr. Mo. Also, we're going to talk about Touch and the doctors. And so we're going to be scheduling those soon. Probably will air in November, but
we'll put them on the website. The other thing too, next week, you guys, we're going to talk about the power of our vote and voting for our health. And we have, When We All Vote coming up, Black Girls Vote, and supermajority.
Nice.
I'm going to talk about, so I'd love to talk to you about some of the legislation you're talking about so we can bring it up and.
Yes, it's so important.
Great.
Yes.
I got 2 quick questions. Jamil, is there a list of clinical trials on METAVIVR for metastatic breast cancer, or can that be in the works, you think, for patients who might
That is
want
in
to?
the works.
Perfect.
And
the
Black
second
Data
question-
Matters is doing that too. We're talking about, their citizens' focus is going to be on metastatic breast cancer. So
Is there a list of questions for people who are newly diagnosed to maybe ask their physician? Can we put together something like that and put it on your website so that people who are listening and watching say, oh, there was a show on metastatic breast cancer, can go to that website and just print out a list of questions that they might ask their doctors?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
right,
All
and we'll
right,
do that
absolutely.
too. Let's do that together, Jamil. We can work
I
on
would
that.
love to help with that
Okay.
as well. Yeah, any input,
Okay.
because I think that's
Nice.
what people need.
And we really do want to be the resource for metastatic breast cancer. And if you care about stopping the deaths of breast cancer,
Right.
focus on metastatic.
Great. Yeah.
All right, how can people reach you? Real quick round robin, how can they find you on social media, et cetera? How can they contribute to the causes that matter to you and ask your questions and pump your head up and tell you how beautiful you are and how special you are?
Well, metavivor.org,
Yep.
lwbc.org, and just Google Jamil Rivers. I'm on everything.
She's everywhere, right. Terlisa,
Same thing. Google at Terlisa Fights.
I love your handle, Terlisa Fights. I love that.
Terlisa Fights and metavivor.org. You'll find us there.
Great.
Awesome.
Shantae,
Google. You can see me everywhere. I feel like the poster child sometimes.
it's
Go
okay.
all over social media and it'll tell you what my names are.
Great,
All right.
great. Dr. Lori, what's your email?
Yeah, exactly. I'm at Lori, LORI.Wilson@howard.edu.
Best breast surgeon in the region, in the area. I'm telling you, if you need a doc, this is who you want to go see.
You want.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that, to the day when you hold up that letter that announces.
Look, we'll be looking. We're counting now.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you need somebody to write a letter in your behalf, we are happy.
Prayer warriors are in place. Yeah.
I'm Dr. Monique Gary on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, the Twitter, the YouTube, the Instagram, all the things.
Yes.
I
Are
can't
you on
keep-
TikTok?
Right.
keep up with it all, but
Terry
but
actually worked really hard to put up our YouTube channel. So now we have a Touch BBCA YouTube channel.
Nice.
We're posting the episodes. We're posting all of our episodes on our website. So touchbbca.org or at touchbbca or at Ricky Dove, to find us. And thank you
Wonderful.
so much, you guys. I love you so much, my breasties.
I'm so encouraged. We're making a
I hope that
difference.
this has been relatable, reliable, and real. That's what we set out to do with this show. So the doctor is in. We will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Breasty love. Breasty love.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.